and then also licensed through the state in order to be registered as a home inspector. I then did 7 or so inspections free of charge, just walk on with my current employer, and then became an inspector. And I've been doing that about 4 years now. So we provide all kind of inspections, specifically, however, for investors, because it doesn't always make sense to get a full top to bottom inspection. We provide what we call a 4-point inspection. These are specifically targeted for the major systems that, either A, cost the most, or B, that you would definitely have to invest in order to either put a tenant in, to flip the property, whatever it may be. So 4 points cover the roof, electrical, HVAC, and the plumbing, which includes the water heater. And in my case, although it's still just a 4-point, because plumbing, even HVAC, a lot of electrical, because that usually takes me into the foundation part of the property, whether it's basement, crawl space, or split, or any other, except for slabs, of course, because I can't see below the slab. Because it takes me into those areas, I do in fact take a look at the foundation. It is, once again, probably the biggest and most expensive for repair system on a property. So I will look at that as well. Those come at a cheaper rate than a full inspection, about $225. And that, allows us to get an idea of the bones, so to speak, as far as the major systems on a property. We do walk roofs. I enter crawl spaces as much as I possibly can safely. We open electrical panels and actually look on the inside at the wiring. We're not just testing receptacles or, just a visual only. We actually do remove the panels and check out what we've got going on inside. I run the HVAC systems. We use IR thermometers in order to get temperature variance to be able to tell how much a system is cooling and or heating, or if it's doing anything at all. Same thing with the water heaters. We test at each fixture to prove that hot water is being produced. We run any and all plumbing that we possibly can, and then I look at as much as I possibly can. Like I said, foundations, a lot of times if there's major problems, we are, of course, going to recommend a specialist. But there's certain things that we look for as far as the type of cracks that are there, the area where the property is located. There's a lot of properties, for example, in I know Glen Iris, part of Birmingham, is actually big on high-end flips right now. But a lot of those properties are quite literally built on a hill. So a lot of them end up, just by virtue of that, having immediate foundation stuff that needs to be done. But value in that area, it tends to make sense to get repairs to the foundation. So my purpose today, although of course, please hire me for inspections, and I'm also happy to answer questions. And bottom line, get yourself an inspection to protect yourself. There are some things that you can actually utilize as far as observations that can be made, common information that doesn't involve you to be licensed or experienced, so that when and if you get the opportunity to view and walk through a property prior to inspection, you can actually give yourself a pretty good idea of what you're looking at, or at least notice some red flags before you even put an offer or consider moving forward on that property. So we're going to go over those today. And before I move forward, does anyone have any questions whatsoever about home inspections? I think I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I'm licensed with Timberline Inspection Services. We are a multi-inspector firm operating in Central Alabama. Company was started in Clanton. We have an inspector in Hoover, and I operate out of Vincent, which is northeastern Shelby County, almost in St. Clair and Talladega. So we pretty much cover most of Central Alabama. All right, does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, we will go ahead and Tanya, as far as sharing the screen, I just hit the share screen here.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, can we see this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let me get to the beginning here. Okay. So, as inspectors, what we're doing is going through a property, no matter what type of inspection has been ordered, whether it's a 4-point that we're going to be talking about here, which I mentioned was strictly the roof, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, and then of course I look at the foundation, or it's a full standard inspection, which quite literally covers everything else. That's more of a concern for cosmetics, for interior. On the 4 points, you pretty much know that you're going to gut a property or at least do heavy renovations, to either put in a tenant or to flip. So the cosmetics are not much of an issue, as knowing that the plumbing works and has no leaks, that the HVAC is not, gone out on you, the water heater, same thing. Make sure the roof's literally not falling through, or that you're not going to immediately need to replace it in order to have a tenant or to sell it. So we go through the property, we provide photographs, commentary on a compiled report, which is then emailed to you that afternoon. And of course, I'm always happy to go over the inspection if you can't meet me at the property. Let's see. But there are, again, some things that you can be aware of, some things that you can do while walking through a property, even if you're only there 10 or 20 minutes. I know sometimes you don't get that much time to really go through it before you have to choose to pull the plug or pull the trigger. So in this particular case, to start with, on this photograph, what we have is an inspection of the plumbing in a bathroom. This is the tub, of course, and if you notice there in the center, this tub's a mess, but in the center of the photograph, you can actually see some dark colored water. What this is, and again, if the plumbing is on to the property when you are viewing it, especially if no one's been in it for a while, something that gives you a good idea on these older properties is to go turn on each faucet. Make sure you turn them off before you leave. But what you're looking for is sediment deposits from rust in the galvanized piping. When you're having issues with the galvanized piping rusting, it will produce a dark or brownish, dirty colored water. In this particular case, I wasn't quick enough to catch it, but it actually produced grayish black water before it cleared up, turned brown, and then eventually cleared up. On that same house, which we'll show a photograph in a minute, we actually found where galvanized piping was rusting through. So to give yourself kind of a good idea, especially if it's an older property that might have galvanized piping, go through, turn on the faucets, see what you get. It'll be almost immediate, and then it'll clear up, and that'll give you an idea. Okay, we've got some deterioration. We need to look a little further at the plumbing. Okay, let's see here. Get to my next picture. Forgive me, they're not in order. I'm gonna have to jump around. This is the exact same house. This is actually a really, really cool property. It's a 1935 Tudor in Bush Hills. that I did not very long ago. But all of the piping was original piping. It had not been updated. So it was galvanized steel. Can you guys see the cursor move on the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. So this is a section of galvanized piping. And then in multiple areas throughout the basement, we actually had areas where the pipe was so deteriorated that it was actually rusting through. And you end up with these almost cave-like formations, like stalactites, and it'll get longer and longer and longer until eventually it rusts through, and then you've actually got a leak. So you can look at pipe if you get an opportunity to walk into the basement, if the property has a basement or a walk-in cellar, something accessible, you can look for this right here. You see that and you go ahead and know, okay, I need to put back money for plumbing or have a further plumbing evaluation, prior to investing in the property. Sometimes properties will have had at least a portion of the plumbing updated, usually drainage. But if it's not done as a whole and material like this exists, which is very good, but at the time that it was put in, that means those properties now are 75 years old or so. So it's near the end of its life. It's a very good idea to pay attention to it, to look and see, if you have this type of piping. And usually, especially if it's not been updated, it's just time to have it all replaced, even if it's not currently leaking everywhere. This is just going to continue. It's going to pop up from certain places, especially if the property's been vacant and water just sits in the pipe. This also happens a little more often. Okay. So as I said, run the faucets, look for dark colored water or sediment in the water. Look at, visible piping that you can see something like this. Okay, so there was some really interesting stuff on this house. Coincidentally, this is the same 1935 Tudor. It did still, in fact, have some of the very first wiring ever used. And I like to cover this because a lot of the properties in Birmingham are, at least 60 or so years old. In this case, just about anything built up until, I want to say around 1940, could possibly have the earliest version of electrical wiring, which again is called knob and tube wiring. It still exists in a lot of properties. How, I'm not really sure. I think it's luck of the draw mostly. But even though it still exists, it's been known to have fire issues and overheating problems in so many properties that there really is no legal way, or I should say approved way as far as licensing to make it safe. It really just needs to be replaced or you could have issues. So when you're in a property, if you get to view it, if it has a walk-in door, something very easily accessible for the attic, or if again it has a walk-in basement or cellar, start looking for two single pieces of wire that run parallel to one another, fairly close, that run through porcelain tubes that have been set inside the framing or the floor joists, and knobs, which help secure the wiring and it also help it turn corners. Usually you'll see a knob and then it'll take a 90-degree turn. Being able to identify this can let you know, how outdated and how expensive, the electrical upgrading you would need to do on the property you're looking at might be. And like I said, what I do when I'm on inspection, I'm actually able to use a tester and see if this wiring is live or if it's been abandoned. If it's been abandoned, which is good information for me to be able to provide, then there is no problem. It's okay to be on the property as long as it's not being used. And really, the hot tester, or the hot stick, as we call it, will actually allow me to try to figure that out, to let you know whether it's still being used or if it has been upgraded, if the electrical has been upgraded and that wiring has been abandoned. Let's see. Okay. So next we'll go ahead. Again, this is kind of an added part that I do because plumbing, HVAC, and electrical take me into crawl spaces, basements, and cellars. Not necessarily included on the inspection, but it is a big deal for properties in Alabama, so I do take a look at it. As far as a foundation is concerned, in Alabama, because it is a moist, humid state, we do get a fair amount of rain. It is not uncommon to have moisture intrusion or moisture entry in the basement and or crawl space, but anytime water is able to come in, that usually means a couple of things. Either, the property is flat and the grade outside has not been made negative, for water to roll away from the property, or the property is settling heavily, and it allows the water in. So I pay attention to staining, evidence of water entry. If this is the only issue that I find, it's actually minor, but we need to get that water taken care of, because that water, even if it hasn't yet, can cause other issues such as this. Now, this is something, along with that staining, if the basement, and cellar are accessible. But this is something that you can look for. So there's different types of cracks in foundation that we pay attention to. A step crack is quite literally a crack that starts at a point and follows the mortar joints and goes down like a set of steps. Anytime it does that, it's the more common of settlement cracking. It can even be shrinkage cracking, which is completely common in cosmetic. Then you have cracks that go from top to bottom, vertically, straight through materials. That usually means that you've got settlement on one side heavier than the other, and one side of the property is actually sinking and it's caused a crack down through the foundation. Those are much more serious, but this one in particular is the one that I want people to be able to walk in and identify even prior to getting an inspection or having a specialist look. Is called a deflection crack or a horizontal crack. So this is the crack here, and there is really only one of two ways that these appear, none of which are really good. But concerning deflection or horizontal cracking, either A, the moisture found has caused such heavy settlement that the bottom section of this foundation is settling faster than the top can catch up, leaving a gap. Or, what is usually more serious and more common, is a deflection crack, which literally means that the reason why this crack has opened up is because the earth behind the foundation wall is pushing it inward. That's a failure in the wall. That is a structural issue. It can be extremely expensive to repair right out of the gate. They generally have to bring in heavy metal, or another term is helical piers, and mount them from the concrete floor to the framing above to keep the wall from pushing in. I've done properties where my client was looking to purchase, and the seller had these repairs done and left a receipt. And this is a worst case scenario. This is drastic, but I've seen a receipt for this kind of work in the neighborhood of $32,000. It really depends on how major the problem is, how extensive it is. This one, although only in about a quarter of the foundation wall, was more serious than normal because I was actually able to put a finger into the wall. That's how wide the crack was. These are cracks that you can see on your own. Especially when they're this wide, there really is no question that a foundation specialist is needed and that there is a fairly severe foundation problem. Always get a specialist, because they've got the answers, they've got the options for repair. But this is something that you can see, especially if you get to walk into a basement for a couple of minutes, walk along the walls, just look at it and see if you find anything like this. Okay. So as I said, we do walk on roofs when and if it's safe to do so. I've been on a couple of properties, unfortunately, in Birmingham where they've just been neglected for so long that you can immediately tell once you put a foot on the roof that it wasn't going to hold you. So, we have to be careful and make sure we're being safe. Also the height, if this is a 2 or 3 story building and I can't safely get up there with the ladder and actually walk on it, then I can't do that either. But what we're looking for is quality, or excuse me, not quality, but condition of the shingles. We also look for installation problems. We look for major damage, missing shingles, things like that. But for example, if it's a low enough house, not a 2 story or anything like that, and you can see the roof surface from the ground, although in this case, there is no substitute for walking on the roof, in my professional opinion. If it's bad enough, which is what you really need to know right out of the gate, before having an inspection and seeing the extent. If it's bad enough, you can see this from the ground. Because the granules are so deteriorated and the fiberglass material beneath the granules, which is what the shingles are actually made out of, because that's exposed, it will actually shimmer in the sunlight pretty heavily. It's also white, so it contrasts. You can really see it from the ground if you've got a good vantage point. If you're noticing things like this and it just looks threadbare and you've got a lot of shine going on in the sun, you can go ahead and bet that roof surface, we're just talking about the shingles right now, the roof surface is beyond its service life, possibly having some leakage. And at least you can go ahead and say, in your head, I need to, account for the money to at least have repair and patching done. This extensive, this really needs to be replaced. But at least have some money set aside for that. One other note concerning roofing inspections on a 4-point. And the reason why I say this is because the 4-point only covers the 4 systems that I mentioned, and then of course foundation. Because it only covers that, I'm not looking at everything. Now, if I go into a property and it's very clear that there's a huge stain on the ceiling and it's growing some kind of fungal growth, I do not ignore it. It's very easily noticeable. It's right in my face. It's something important you need to know about. It will go in the report. But I'm not actually looking for that kind of thing because of this type of inspection. So one note that I can also give is when you get to view the property prior to inspection, or whether you get one or not, make a mental note or even possibly write it down, take photographs of any and all staining that you find on the ceiling. If you have a picture of this staining, if you've made a note of where it is, you can kind of monitor next time you get an opportunity to see the property or when you get an inspection. If the stain has grown, if it's gotten worse, especially if it rains during this time period, if you know exactly where that stain was, that's one of the best ways. I use a moisture meter to actually test the stain when I see it at the time of inspection to see if it is technically wet or dry. 20% is considered wet, although I go ahead and start making comments after 16 or 17. 20% moisture is all that's required to grow fungal growth. So if we've got 20% moisture, regrettably, we could have some kind of growth going on. So make a note of these stains, know where they are, and then you can keep an eye on them or monitor them. Also, if you go in and there's 15 different stains in the ceiling, they can give you a good idea of like, okay, the roof is more than likely leaking. Let's see here. Okay. So on to the HVAC. And when we're testing the HVAC, again, we go in with a IR thermometer or an infrared thermometer. This allows us to turn the system on, set a temperature, and then go around to every register that produces heated or cooled air and actually get an idea of what type of temperatures it's producing based on the intake air at the return grill. From there, we can kind of tell whether the system's working well, whether it needs some maintenance, whether it's working at all. So that being said, when you view the property and you get to walk around, you may not actually get the opportunity to turn on the HVAC to, set a temperature and stay there to see if you can notice a change. But what you do get the opportunity to do is look at the unit outside at least. And in this case, there are some pretty easily noticeable things. As you can see, this unit looks pretty rough as far as the fins are concerned. Now, fin damage is not like an immediate huge problem, but it gives you an idea, A, of the condition of the unit, and then B, the age. Usually, the older it is, the more of this you're going to see. That can kind of give you an idea of the unit that you're looking at as far as how long it's been there, how well it's been taken care of or not taken care of. Then, what we're also doing for both the AC condenser, which I just showed you, and the heating side of the HVAC, whether it be a heat pump on the inside, a gas furnace on the inside, or if this is a package unit, that's located on the exterior that has AC and heat inside. We're looking at the data plate, trying to get some information from that. Most importantly, what we're trying to find out is an actual age, a date of manufacture. The reason why I used a Goodman AC unit or HVAC unit as an example is because Goodman is one of those companies. One, you see them everywhere. They're fairly affordable. Excuse me. They definitely last a while, or at least they used to. It's different now. Things are just not made the way they used to be. But for Goodman, at least, they almost never varied from their way of making a serial number. The serial number is what's used to date the unit. For some reason, not all companies put like over here, it'll say MFG or date of manufacture, and then actually have the date. I don't know why they don't all do that, but they don't. So in that case, the serial number is what we have to look at. Goodman's 110% of the time, it's the first two digits. So this unit was built in 1997. In the case that you see in 97, these units, both heating and cooling, are really only built to last about 15 years. So in this case, you can go ahead and know that this unit is beyond its service life. If it's working at all, it needs maintenance. This allows you to kind of set the money aside and let you know you need to be concerned about this, or at least have it written down as far as something you need to be concerned about. Again, not all of the units have an easily discernible date or have it written out. I'm trying to remember exactly a trick that I tell clients and investors is what I use to find out the dates on these units. There's actually a website, and Manisha and Tawny, you might have to remind me exactly, but I believe it's buildingintelligencecenter.net. Is that correct?
That sounds like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way, what I do, actually a shortcut, is find out the brand of the unit and literally type or speak into Google age of Goodman AC unit, and just make sure that the option you click on says Building Intelligence Center at the bottom of it. It takes you straight to it.
Hey, Cody, it's actually www.building-center.org.
Okay, I never get
And then
that right.
it comes
Like I said,
up, and then it comes up saying Building Intelligence Center.
Okay, good.
But I'll
Yeah, like
put
I said,
it in
I
the
never
chat.
remember. Please, yeah, definitely. I never remember because, like I said, I use the shortcut. I just go, age of Goodman AC unit, and then make sure the one I click on says Building Intelligence or Building Center. Might take you a minute to read through, and you got to make sure you're looking at the correct version of the serial number. But that site will allow you to get a year on that unit if it does not actually say, again, MFG and then a year, or manufactured year, blah, blah, blah. That will help you get an age of the unit. Also kind of let you know last time any kind of HVAC repair was really done, which is all highly beneficial. Let's see. So HVAC, roof, foundation. Okay. And that's all of the examples that I have. Again, these inspections cover the roof, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, including water heater, and then I go into the foundation. This is information that can most definitely at least allow you to figure out the numbers as far as whether the deal makes sense for you, and then help you to find out where those monies can be best spent, depending on what type of investing you're doing. Again, as I said before, if you're wholesaling a property, inspections make absolutely no sense financially or otherwise. Don't get one. You're getting a property at a certain amount of money, and then you're selling it off to an investor for a little bit more. There's no reason to get an inspection. But if you're flipping a property, if you're doing a buy and hold, whether you're going to have a long time tenant or you're doing, a 2-year occupancy and then selling it, whatever that may be, these inspections can help you figure out where to put that money at the beginning to help the longevity of the property, to be able to house someone in the property. We also do, it's not just single family dwellings, we will also do multi-unit, whether it be duplexes, triplexes, 4 or quad, even, larger. We've actually done I believe it was a 32 unit apartment building. That was a team effort. It took all of us, all 3 inspectors, not too long ago. We can do properties like that, although it's a little different. And of course, pricing varies. Generally, what I like to do is a 4-point for every unit. And then I can price it accordingly. But it really all depends on what your need is as far as inspections. We no longer do things like mold testing and radon testing, which again, for investors, that stuff doesn't make a lot of sense. But while I'm remembering that we don't do that anymore, I wanted to go ahead and put that out there. I think for the most part, that is it. Are there any questions whatsoever? I'll be happy to answer.